Hello, welcome back to a new video. My name is Otta, and today I'll be discussing all the steps needed in order to buy a rental property. So if you haven't checked out my last video, and I'll link that in the description, basically in my last video I discussed my personal experience in buying rental properties. So currently I have one rental property for almost a year now. I bought it last year around September or November, I think, and it's almost been a year and it's been going really well. And so I discussed that in my personal experiences and the steps that I took in the last video that I posted. So a lot of the things that I covered today, if I already covered them in the last video, they won't be in as much detail, but there are a lot of things such as inspections, mortgages, etc. that I will get into in pretty detailed fashion, which should help out anyone interested in the rental property, rental properties rather. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so step number one to buying rental properties is having available down payment if you aren't buying the house in cash. So for me, I bought my house in cash, and I discussed more of that in the last video. But if you want to buy a home and you don't have enough cash and you want to take out a mortgage, usually for the down payment you'll need about 15 to 20%. So make sure to have that amount ready, especially for bigger homes that price could be pretty steep. So just keep that in mind before you begin the entire process. Alright, so step number two is getting a loan. So it's similar to the first step. If you're not buying a home in cash, you'll need a loan. And so step number two is having a good credit score, because as you may know, if you don't have a good credit score, it's going to be really hard to get a loan at a good rate. And so basically what you should strive to have in terms of credit score for good loan rates is around 740 to 760 credit score. That way your rates will be a lot better than if it's lower, and the bank will treat you a lot nicer if your credit score is good. Alright, so step number three should be a lot more fun than the first two steps, because this step is where you start looking at homes. So you should look at a lot more homes than you probably need to, just so you can get a really good understanding of the types of homes that you may want, and also just price ranges and the potential amount of rent that you can get from each home. So looking at a lot is way better than just looking at a few homes and then selecting it. In addition, some things to keep in mind, looking out of the state that you live in may be an option if you don't mind seeing the day-to-day operations of the home. And so that could be a lot more affordable depending on which state you live in. Also, you have to keep in mind the HOA fee, which has advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantages are, of course, that you have to pay an additional fee every month if you buy a condo, which usually comes with an HOA fee. However, an advantage of it is that if something happens to the exterior of the home, it's most likely covered under HOA. Okay, so step number four, after looking at properties, when you continue to look at properties, make sure that the property that you may potentially buy will make cash flow, because obviously you're buying this rental property as an investment and in order to make money. And so you want to make sure that you at least break even with the property at first, obviously with the intention of getting your money back in the future, but at least breaking even at first should be the main goal. But most likely you want to not break even and actually make cash flow. And so you have to think about the insurance costs, the HOA fee if you have any, mortgage costs if you take out a loan, and also the rent in that area. So step number five may be a step that isn't for everyone, but I just decided to include it. It wasn't really for me, but it may be helpful to some of you. So step number five is potentially buying homes that need a little bit of fixing. So usually you want to look for houses that have nice roofs, good plumbing, a good exterior, because a lot of the inside stuff like paint, rugs, things like that they could be fixed up for fairly cheap prices, and they can dramatically increase the price of the home from what you bought it for. So this can increase your ROI pretty quickly if done right. However, there are some things to keep in mind. So first, with renovations, you never want to make the renovations too expensive. You just want to make them just right and just good enough so that the person living there obviously has a good experience and it's nice and clean, but you don't want to go over the top, because that's how you lose money that you put into the house most likely. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that renovations usually take 20% longer than the person tells you that it will, and also it costs usually at least 20% more than you were planning on spending on it. Alright, so step number 6 is making offers. Obviously, let's say you found the best home that you want out of the many that you looked through, and so now it's time to make an offer. So a couple things to keep in mind. You usually want to make an offer under asking price. Don't be afraid to do that, because usually if the person doesn't have that much interest in the home, the price that you give, if it's the best that they've gotten so far, it usually won't matter if it's a couple grand or so under the asking price. Also, make sure to get a really good real estate agent, because they will help you tremendously in these negotiations, and so that's something to keep in mind. Don't be really stubborn about the price. Like if they ask you to come up like $1,000 or a couple hundred, don't be stubborn and say no, but also don't overpay for the property. Really, I would say the biggest key for this step is to trust your gut and trust your real estate agent's instincts as well, because they know a lot better than you probably do. Alright, so you bought the home, you made an offer, you're about to buy rather, and so next comes the inspections. So in this step, you want to make sure that you inspect everything you can and figure out exactly what it will cost. And so after you figure out exactly what these potential renovations will cost, make sure to ask the previous owners if they can pay for it or take that price out of the original asking price of the home. Usually they will give something. If not, pay for it all, they may take it out of the original asking price. They may give you half, like pay for half and you pay for like the other half. Usually they will always give something, even though they say that they might not. Usually they will. Alright, so just a couple of final steps to keep in mind. This next step is that if you buy a home needing renovations, you should start these renovations right away. So obviously you're buying this rental property to get a tenant in there as quickly as possible in order to start making cash flow. And so you don't want to wait on these renovations, because like I said, they usually take 20% longer than you intended them to, and so you want to get it started right away if you can, of course. And also, just another step to keep in mind with these renovation process is that you usually always want to be on site, or at least have someone that you trust be on site while these renovations are going on, because most of the time things will go wrong or there will be misunderstandings, and so to not have any of that, you always want to be on site and be there while the fixes are being made. Alright, so the second to last step is getting tenants. So like I said in the previous step, the goal of buying a rental property is that you want to start making cash flow, and the only way to do that is to get a tenant in the home. You want to take really good pictures of the home. You want to post them on all the sites, and when tenants reach out, make sure to respond to them quickly and always be aware that a tenant could reach out. Okay, so the last step isn't really a step to buy the home, but is just a step for after you buy the home, and it's to scale up. So if you want to make this a really good investment opportunity, obviously buying one home, unless it's very expensive, will not do that for you, so you need probably a couple. And so my recommendation is that you wait a year to 18 months after you buy your first rental property, and after like the tenant and everything is settled in there, you should wait a year to 18 months before buying your second one. And then the steps after that are pretty basic. I mean, it's basically rinse and repeat. So that brings us to the end of this video. I think I've covered all the steps that I went through, and I think I covered all the steps that are needed for anyone looking to get a rental property. And just keep in mind that no matter how old or young you are, you can always do this. I mean, I was 19 when I bought my first rental property, and you know, if you're younger than that, older than that, it doesn't really matter. Just keep these steps in mind, and I'm sure that you'll do a great job of buying a rental property. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that you should not do all of this yourself. You know, and you can, that doesn't mean like spend a lot of money on other people doing all this for you, but just reach out, get you know, other people's feedback that have been in this business a lot longer, in terms of real estate agents or people that you know that have multiple rental properties, things like that. And so other than that, that wraps up this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.